All right, so welcome to the seventh episode of the Inside Blitz podcast. We just wrapped up week 8, about to head into week 9, the last week of the regular season, and a lot of stuff to cover. Today, joining me is a special guest, the AD and head coach of the Tennessee Volunteers, Scott Owens, also known as Fired Up. Scott, thanks for joining us. It was a
Thanks
great
for
week.
having me.
It's a great week last week. We had probably our well, not probably our most amazing game of the year. Um, Auburn defeats Iowa 74-72. I don't know. Did you get a chance to go back and watch that, or did you watch that live? I don't remember.
I did not watch it all live. I watched some of it. I had to go, but I did come back and watch it, and that was just the craziest game. I don't think we could ever beat that
I don't
ever.
think so either. It's crazy that in season one we're going to get probably our greatest game ever. But
Probably.
1,546 yards of total offense, 909 combined passing yards, and 13 combined passing touchdowns. And all 17 touchdowns combined by the quarterbacks. So it was an amazing game. The losing team, Iowa, with their 72 points of offense, Justin Meese led the way, was 30 of 38, 417 yards and 6 touchdowns, no picks. Also had 93 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. And he was only the second best player in this game. Blake Moon, 35 of 53, 492 yards, 7 touchdowns, an interception on the first drive of the game, and then 95 yards rushing and 2 more touchdowns. Moon rallies with 2 come from behind touchdowns in the last 2 minutes of the game, and then 2 come from behind touchdowns in overtime, including the game winning 2 point conversion. So it was an amazing game all around. Brandon's in the chat, Brandon Davis. He was the first player in league history to have 100 yards rushing and 100 yards receiving in the same game. Great game by him, but just was not quite enough. Alex A. Cook and Ethan Spoker both had 3 touchdown receptions. Devonta Earlycutt had a good game, 140 yards, 2 touchdowns, also had a touchdown receiving. So 3 players with 3 touchdowns. It was an amazing game. And like I said, one I don't think is going to be topped. It is on YouTube. If any of you guys did not see it, I cut it down a little bit. I cut it down from like an hour and a half to 45 minutes. So you save quite a bit of time, but I think the 45 minutes that's there is it's amazing. I've watched that game 3 times. So
It's well worth the
it
watch.
is.
Well worth the watch.
It's just it's captivating the whole time, and you get some packisms
Mhm.
along the way, which definitely helps and it makes it more exciting. Last week we also had Hawaii knocked off Notre Dame to keep themselves alive in the playoff race, and also we were looking at the playoff scenarios, which we'll cover in a minute. Unless we got something wrong, I believe Hawaii has solidified themselves in the playoffs. So Notre Dame and Hawaii, the 2 teams that are locked into the playoffs. Hawaii did so with the win over Notre Dame last week, 31-22. Boise, and I know this one is personal for you. Boise knocks Tennessee out of the playoffs and helps their own playoff chances, 56-24, in a game in which Tennessee's defense looked nothing like the unit that we've seen for most of the year. Adric Berry adds 6 TDs to his total and strengthens his case for Player of the Year. That was a crazy game. We'll maybe touch on that a little bit later on, and then Ohio State knocks off Florida State, keeps Ohio State's playoff berth alive by knocking off Florida State, and also puts Florida State in jeopardy. Florida State, the number 1 team just a few weeks ago, and actually last week, the last couple weeks, Florida State's been the number 1 team, and they are now sitting there in danger of not making the playoffs. So that is crazy. Jay Smith had a great game in that one, 355 total yards and 5 touchdowns. Aries Lewis also had a breakout game for him late in the season, 155 yards and touchdown on the ground. So great week of action. A lot of playoff implications. Tennessee had a great run, and it got ended there. But like I said, we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. We'll get to our Player of the Week voting. It was we all talked about it, and we all said, well, most of us said if Blake Moon didn't win Player of the Week, it would be a travesty. One of the things that came up was Justin Meese had 8 touchdowns and no picks. Blake Moon had 9 and 1 pick, but he also had, I think it was almost 80 yards more. So I don't know how much a pick equals in there. But just looking at stats, they were very close. Just me said an amazing game. But if you watched the game and you saw two come from behind touchdowns in the last 2 minutes of the game, two in overtime, and then a 2-point conversion, not to mention a very crazy play at the end of the first half in which Blake Moon ignores timeouts and a field goal attempt and runs it in for a touchdown as time expired. Um,
Yep.
there was zero reason for Blake Moon not to get the vote, and he does wind up winning the Player of the Week. So with 68% of
Good.
the vote, which was a lot closer than most of us thought, but Blake Moon is our Week 8 Player of the Week. On the defensive side, this was, I think, our closest vote yet. And DeAndre Spires of Hawaii wins his first Player of the Week. And it's the first Player of the Week for a Hawaii player in a while. I believe since Chris Oley early on. Spires, I don't have the stats in front of me. Scott, if you do, I forgot to write them down for some reason. But
Which one?
DeAndre Spires. I know he had a tackle for loss, a pick, and a pass defense, and I believe 9 tackles. But if you have that in front of you,
I actually do not.
Okay. I believe it
pulled
was
the
9
poll up
tackles, a
earlier.
tackle for a loss, an interception, and a pass defense. So DeAndre Spires with 40% of the vote wins Defensive Player of the Year for Week 8. Justin Philhart came in second, just missed his third Player of the Week vote, and then Jack Frost came in third with 28%, Philhart at 32%, and so total adds up to 100. So I think it's the first time we've had a player with less than 50% of the vote win, but it was a very tight race. Only a few votes separated all three. So congrats to Blake Moon and DeAndre Spires, our Week 8 Players of the Week. So moving on, that brings us to our playoff scenarios, which I know is on everybody's mind as we head into the offseason. So one of the biggest things that was asked during I think it was the Ohio State-Florida State game, Auburn players were asking during that game what the playoff scenarios were, and I didn't have it, and it was confusing. So Auburn is still in it, and the way that they are in it is if Auburn wins and Ohio State loses, Auburn will get in by way of tiebreaker over Florida State. However, that's the only way Auburn can get in. They have to win. Ohio State has to lose. Ohio State has a couple of paths. If Ohio State wins and Auburn beats Florida State, Ohio State is in. If Ohio State wins and Boise loses, Ohio State is in. Now, weird scenario that could come up, and I know Scott has his previews for Week 9 coming up, but weird scenario. If Ohio State wins, Auburn wins, and Boise loses, it becomes a multi-way tie. Florida State would be eliminated by having tiebreaker by Auburn and Ohio State having tiebreakers over. So Florida State would be out. And then it would be between the three of them. Ohio State would have tiebreakers over both Boise and Auburn, so they would be in. And then it would come down to Auburn and Boise. Boise has a tiebreaker over Auburn, so Boise and Ohio State would advance in that scenario in which all three of them win, or those two win and Boise loses. So interesting playoff or interesting scenarios there. But Auburn knows what they got to do. Auburn's going to win, and then they need to root hard for Ohio State to lose. Ohio State needs to win, and then they need to root hard for either Auburn to win, which is interesting, or Hawaii to win and knock it off Boise. So there you have it. Let's see. I'll check the chat here, see if there's any topics that came up while we were on there. Well, Dale Moore trying to draw us off topic and see who's going to win the home run derby. So for a different podcast and a different sport, Pack talking about his clean living. I don't buy that at all. So moving on to the next part of the show, as the playoff scenarios are kind of interesting. Now we'll get into a different part of it here with the previews, as we'll talk about playoff seeding, and that will be interesting. So Scott, you came up with your predictions for this week. So talk about the matchups this week and how you see these Week 9 matchups unfolding.
Well, first, I think it's pretty cool that we have 6 teams that are within a game. So out of 8 teams, 6 teams can get in the playoffs this week.
A lot of parity.
Yeah, a lot of parity. I guess the first game to talk about is Auburn, Florida State. I have Auburn winning that game. I think they'll. My prediction is 38-34. Auburn winning that game.
Wow.
Blake Moon has been. I mean, he's been a gamer all year. He's been a comeback guy, and I look for him to do it again and get the win.
All right.
So, do you want me to go through each one,
Yeah,
and then we
go
can just
through
kind
each
of?
one. I mean, I tend to stay away from predictions. I know people
Oh,
like
okay.
I know people like to know predictions, but I tend to stay away from them. I mean, I do them when I'll do the game previews, but the reason I stay away from them is because I'm in control of all the stats and everything.
Well, you are right.
Yeah, and so like I don't want to appear biased in any way. I think it's going to be an interesting game, and I think this is the biggest game of the year for Blake Moon. Auburn fighting for their playoff lives. He puts up 74 points. Iowa, with really nothing to play for, put up 72, which makes Auburn's defense interesting. I don't know what happened to Auburn's defense, but if their offense plays anything like they did against Iowa, and they're able to come up with a decent offense or decent defense, they've got a really good shot at knocking off Florida State. Florida State, who hasn't looked, didn't look so sharp last week. So we'll see on that one. So second game on the slate, Thursday or the Tuesday night's 8 o'clock game.
We know that's my game. That's Notre Dame and UT.
That one's got to be hard for you
like
to
you
pick.
said, do what?
That one's got to be hard for you to pick.
Well, I'm going to pick my team. Why not? How can I not? I think our defense had a Fortnite tournament or something the night before. I don't know what happened. We couldn't stop anything. Adric Berry just continued his run, and we helped that out as he contends for Player of the Year. I think that Notre Dame, they're 2-1 in the last 3 games. They just lost to Hawaii 31-22. We're coming off a loss against Boise. We had won the previous 2 before that. As far as when I was laying out my possible playoff scenarios, I did show that I think we're gonna have a tough game with Notre Dame, and I kind of think we're gonna pull it out. I think we're gonna pull it out 28-24, as we'll and I don't know how that affects Notre Dame with
It'll
their
affect their
playoff push. I
seeding.
think you said
They're guaranteed. And Eric
that's what I
Leclerc,
was gonna say. So
Eric Leclerc asked in the chat, what about if Boise wins? Hawaii has the tiebreaker over both Auburn and OSU. The reason they have it over Auburn is the second tiebreaker is point differential, and unless Auburn beats FSU like 70-0, they're going to maintain the point differential. So they would have the tiebreaker over Auburn, even though they split during the season. And then Hawaii has the tiebreaker over OSU. So unless something really crazy happened and we had a 70-point score, Hawaii's guaranteed a spot. That's why we didn't touch on that.
no, okay.
So going back to your game, it's interesting. Nighthawks disagreeing, which I mean, why wouldn't he? Of course he's going to disagree. But the thing is it's interesting because technically neither of you guys have anything to play for.
Right.
Notre Dame's spot is locked. They're going either way. Yeah, they've got tiebreakers over everybody, which is weird. They have the same record over everybody, but they lost games that didn't wind up being that mattering late. Looking at that was very weird how that all came to be, but somehow because of all the tiebreakers, Notre Dame's locked up. So and then you guys got eliminated with your loss last week. So neither team technically has anything to play for. Notre Dame's got playoff seedings. Getting a game at home, as we've seen lately, home field's seeming to matter a little bit, so that could play a role if you're the number 1 or number 2 seed. But other than that, technically not a lot on the line. I'm sure Notre Dame wants to go into the playoffs, on a good roll, and I'm sure Tennessee, heading into recruiting, wants to look good. You guys.
The one thing we're going. We got to get that. We got to solidify that number 1 scoring defense. That's the goal. Go. That's what we have to play for.
There you go. So a lot of pride on the line for Tennessee, and knowing you like I do, you're not going to lay down and roll over for Notre Dame. So that would be interesting. So Thursday's game, leadoff game for Thursday,
is Ohio State versus Iowa.
And that game is going to be interesting because Ohio State will then know where they're at for the most part. If Auburn wins, then Ohio State knows they have to win. If Auburn loses, then they're going to have to win, and then they're going to need Boise to lose. So, what's your prediction?
I had predicted that Iowa was going to win that game. Iowa, man, they have just, I mean, heartbreak city to score 72 points and lose. That shouldn't happen. There shouldn't have been a loser in that game. But they played really well. 3 weeks ago they played us. We lost. I mean, we won the game 35-31. But Iowa, their record, there's so much parity in this league that they're a good team and they're scary. And I know that David he's looking at them. I think it's going to be a good game. I'm looking at my prediction, just for the prediction's sake, was 48-45 Iowa.
Wow.
And I know that has big implications on the playoffs.
Offensive game might be, that could be what our second or third highest scoring game of the year if that prediction holds true. If you guys remember, this is a rematch of the Screen Bowl, which we had, I believe it was week 2, where Iowa pulled out, I believe it was an 8 or 9 point win in a game in which, if memory serves me, 19 screen passes were thrown. So this is a rematch of that game. I do not expect the same offense from each of these two teams, but it is going to be interesting. Iowa already beat them once, and if nothing else, I know 100% that not only does Iowa not like another Big Ten team, but there's also a Michigan fan that has now become the Michigan AD that would very much like to ruin the season of the Buckeyes, and by beating them, they would. So there is definitely a lot to be played for in that game. So that will definitely be interesting. You're calling for the Iowa upset, which is to the dismay of the Ohio State team, which I don't see any of them in here. Well, actually, Dale Moore was in here, so he's staying quiet on that one. So the game of the week, maybe the game of the year.
Yes.
I scheduled this one for a specific reason, as I had a feeling that both Boise and Hawaii were going to be in the thick of things, and this game could matter. And the last game of the year may wind up being the most important one, as there could be tons of playoff implications. If Auburn wins and Ohio State wins, Boise is playing for their playoff lives. So it's and even if Auburn loses and Ohio State wins, Boise's still playing for their playoff life. So that game is super important. It also could matter a difference between Hawaii possibly being a 2 seed and a 4 seed, and either playing Notre Dame or one of the other teams. Assuming Notre Dame winds up at the number 1 seed, we'll see how this shakes out this week. But that's going to be a very interesting game. How did you see that one coming down?
Well, that one was pretty easy for me. After watching what Adric Berry and Joe Friedrich did against us last week, they're on a roll. I mean, they lost 2 in a row, and I think it made them angry, and we had to be the victims of that anger because that offense was rolling. I don't see Boise losing. Hawaii is a good team, and they've got the playoffs solidified. So I see Boise coming out hungry and winning that one 42-28, with Adric Berry making his final push for the Player of the Year.
14-point win over what has been one of the top 2 teams for most of the season. That would be interesting. That's a great matchup, and that's going to be a rivalry game for many seasons to come, I suspect. It's going to all start Thursday night.
What's funny, Mike, is those 2 teams both come in 1-2 in the last 3. So they both had lost back-to-back games, one last week. So both have had some late season struggles coming into the playoffs.
Both are limping into the playoffs, and Elliot Tubguts has not looked like he looked great and looked like they had the top offense in the league the first few weeks. In the last 5 weeks or so, he has not looked like the world beater he did the first 3 weeks. So definitely going to be very interesting. I'm super excited for that game, as I am for all the games this week. It's going to be interesting to see how everything shakes out and how all the dominoes fall. Now, with your scenarios and who you think winning, how do you see the Final Four shaping up?
Well, I'm going to need your help on this one, as you're the tiebreaker scenario guru. But I have Boise finishing at 6-3.
Okay.
And then I actually have the next 4 teams all at 5-4.
Okay.
With Notre Dame, Hawaii, FSU, and Auburn. So if Notre Dame and Hawaii are in, the tiebreakers FSU and Auburn. Is that an Auburn?
And Auburn would win that because they
Right.
would have beat them head up. So Auburn would then be the 4 seed. Boise would be the 1 seed, and then either Notre Dame or Hawaii would be the 2 seed. And Notre Dame, have they played twice, or have they played twice this season? I can't remember. Do you have the schedule in front of you? Neil, have you played? Neil or Tyler, have you guys played? You guys played Hawaii twice. Yeah, you guys split. Hawaii won last week. So, so then it would go to point differential. So who's got the point differential between the two, Scott?
I just had it up. I just flipped to go look at the schedule. Point differential for Florida State.
It'd be Notre Dame and Hawaii.
I'm sorry, Notre Dame is 39, and Hawaii is 49. Is that what you said, or did you say Auburn?
No, that's right.
I'm looking at Auburn, right?
No, that's right. So based on that, Hawaii would get the 2 seed. They would rematch Notre Dame for a 3rd time, and then Boise would get Auburn again, and Auburn would get a chance at redemption, assuming it played out like that.
Right.
Now, if Hawaii beats Boise, then Hawaii theoretically would get the number 1 seed, unless Tennessee wins, or unless Notre Dame wins, in which case then they would be tied, and then I think it would still go back to it. So then Hawaii would still get so Hawaii looks like a very good shot at the number 1 seed, and Notre Dame really good shot for number 2 seed. So then the next 3 all are going to really depend on who wins and loses this week. And that will be interesting with Hawaii getting a home game, because as we've seen, Hawaii tends to be very windy. And we've seen when Iowa played there, we saw a 3-point game that was decided by missed field goals and inaccurate deep passes. So that would be interesting. That would be an interesting scenario. Now, Nighthawk points out in chat that Notre Dame needs a blowout. So they're only 10 points back. So if and really they wouldn't need a blowout, because if Boise would need to win, or Boise would win anyway. I don't know. That's kind of, yeah. There are ways where Notre Dame could wind up with a 1 seed, but either way, winding up with the 1 or 2 seed would set it up for the national championship game. And we should have probably thought about having a neutral site national championship game, but we didn't plan that out. So we're not going to change it now. So it could come to a tiebreaker deciding who has home field in the championship game. And more than likely not, it's probably going to. So we probably should have done a neutral site, but hindsight's 2020. Who knew it was going to come down to 6 teams within 1 game of each other?
Right.
So
definitely.
That's how things might shake out in week 9. It's going to be exciting. It all starts Tuesday night at 7:00. That's tomorrow night, with Auburn taking on Florida State, and Auburn fighting for their playoff lives. So we'll see that, and it ends Thursday night with the 8:30 game, Hawaii and Boise, and lots of greatness in between. Now, this is a little bit shorter show. We didn't have a lot to cover, and one of the things I wanted to do at the end is a new segment that we're kind of introducing, is the hot seat. And Scott, you're new to
I have no idea what you're about to ask.
You're new to the podcast. I don't know what I'm about to ask either. So, Scott, you're new to the hot seat, and we're gonna put you on the hot seat, and we're gonna fire some questions at you, and you get to tell us your opinions on it. First thing I'm gonna start with is Tennessee starts off 0-4, and then you win 3 in a row, and then for some reason your team fell apart defensively last week. So talk to me about the challenges of starting 0-4, how you guys rebounded to win 3 in a row, and then what in the heck happened to your defense last week?
Well, starting out, Kyle Miller, it took a while for him to find his groove. A lot of that was my fault. A lot of it was scheme. It really took me a while to find that right scheme. Our defense, all 4 of those losses, played well enough to win. We've had a championship defense since week 1.
First 4 losses were a combined 14 points.
Exactly.
So it was not a surprise when you guys started to win.
No, and a matter of fact, I think 3 of the 4 games we had the ball at the end with a chance to at least tie or take the lead, and it just didn't happen for us. But I knew we were close. We adjusted a few things on offense, kind of let the defense do what it was doing, and and the wins came. I think we're ready for next year. As you know, Kyle Miller, Mitchell Kennedy, they both just grown stronger and stronger. And the thing I like about it is the balance. There might be one game where Kyle Miller he puts us on his shoulders and takes us, and then there's another game where we just hand it off to Kennedy. So they're both coming back next year. I'm looking forward to it. I think that the defense is there. I mean, we everybody across the league talks about the hard hits. I mean, with Aaron Smith and Mitchell, and we've got the hitters, so we're ready with Tuiasa Sopo, and we look forward to next year. We're gonna start the recruiting and get ready for next year. And I think that we got something to build up of. We don't have anything to be ashamed of. It was a good year.
It was. I mean, the four close wins and then fighting back, winning 3 in a row, getting yourself back in playoff contention was an amazing job. Very impressive. With everything on the line, and you guys needed one more win to extend your season to this game against Notre Dame.
Yeah,
What happened?
Adric Berry. That's what happened. That guy just. I mean, I made the joke earlier about a Fortnite tournament. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what happened to our defense. We just were sluggish. They come out. Boise come out of the gates, and like I said, they're coming off 2 losses, and you could tell it. They came out hungry. They came out faster than us. They were more focused than us, and they dominated from the start. We tried to make a little comeback. Aaron Smith had the pick 6, and I thought, okay, now we have a chance. But Adric Berry just led them right back down the field, and they hats off to them. They deserved it. They dominated us from the start, and they deserved that win. And that's why I have so much confidence in them moving forward, because what I just saw, if that team shows up, there's no one going to beat them.
Well, and it was almost like Adric Berry just grabbed Joel's hearts and ripped it out. You guys were staying
sure
in
did.
it, and he just would not be denied. And it was almost like you could see the composure just kind of going down, and just like we can't do anything to stop him. Like we don't have an answer. And then all of a sudden it just kind of fell apart there at the end. The fortunate thing is, it's late in the season, so you guys put on a good show. And as we talked about, it's late. You get one more game, and you get to try to make a statement for recruiting. But the one thing we talked about earlier this week was those things kind of happen, and a lot of guys like to point to different things and like, oh, well, this must have been what happened, or that must have been what happened. But sometimes things like that just happen. And we talked about, the example I used was the Vikings in the playoffs last year. Best defense in the league, the last 2 quarters against New Orleans, and then the entire game against Philly, and NFC Championship game, their defense disappeared, just like y'all's did. And there's really not an explanation for it. You don't know.
Nope.
Some things
Nope.
just happen like that. And unfortunately, it happened to the Vikings in the playoffs and knocked them out of the Super Bowl, which a lot of people thought they were going to, although they were lucky to win that game against New Orleans. Same thing with you guys. You guys were going best defense. Finally had figured out your offense. Offense still did pretty good in that game, but the defense just, for whatever reason, they maybe it was the other quarterback. Maybe it was the same thing. Drew Brees took the hearts out of the Vikings. Adric Berry stole the hearts from you guys. But it was definitely interesting. So going forward, what do you see happening with Tennessee going forward, as far as guys that you're losing, guys coming back? What's kind of the plan for Tennessee going into the offseason and looking forward to season 2?
Well, when we started this year, we really focused on defense. I still feel defense wins championships, and that's what our goal was. We did fall a little short, and it's kind of on the hands of the defense. Like you said, our offense actually played pretty well. Defense just couldn't do anything to stop them. I think it's not going to be a total rebuild. We're gonna use the players we have. We have some good players on both sides of the ball. Kyle Miller, I have another year of experience behind him. We're going to focus on getting a couple playmakers for him. I feel I let him down on that. I need to get him a couple playmakers on the outside, and then just continue to solidify that defense. And let's play that Tennessee football and win by controlling the ball, controlling the clock, winning the game. One thing is, even our losses and our wins, almost every game has been close. So it's kind of it's kind of a good and a bad thing, but that's just, our goal is in the fourth quarter, we're in it. And that's the plan. If we're in it in the fourth, then we can win the game. And that's kind of what we shoot for. So we're going to go out and we're going to recruit, try to get Kyle a couple playmakers on the outside, maybe just a couple players, on the defense to solidify. I think we're losing White. We're losing our defensive end with White, so we'll need to replace him and just keep doing what we're doing. It's a process. We fell a little short, but there's no doubt where we're at right now. Those first 4 games, we could have easily been 3-1 instead of 0-4. So I don't feel like it's anything that needs to be totally redone. We just need to keep focused, keep doing what we're doing, and just keep building it. We'll get there.
The Notre Dame game is the one for sure that you guys wound up losing 19-16 in overtime, and I think that's the game that most people thought you guys should have won. There was
that was a heartbreaker.
Miscommunication with a young quarterback at the end of that half, and might have cost you the game, at least cost you an opportunity at a late field goal attempt.
Yes.
That one alone, if that one game switches and everything else plays out the way it did, you guys are in the playoff hunt right now. Talk to me a little bit about the loss of Brian Bosworth Jr. You guys didn't seem to miss a whole lot after that loss, but it was one that took place at the kind of the worst time for you guys, and it actually kind of sparked you guys to turn your season around. Talk a little bit about that. What's it like to lose a player that you had, a big player like that, and how does that make you adjust?
Well, the first person that comes to mind is Tui Asasopo. He moved right over to the middle, and he took it personally, and he said, "Okay, I'm gonna take care of this," and he did. He became the vocal leader on the team, and then I think it motivated everyone. I mean, we ended up giving that scholarship to Taylor at defensive tackle, and with the secondary we have in place, we have full confidence that we can win. We did miss him a little bit, in the middle. I've noticed even though, like you said, it sparked us to win, but I noticed on the run defense we struggled a little bit a couple games.
Probably would have helped against Barry.
Do what?
Probably would have helped against Barry on that read option, having Tui Asasopo on the outside.
Yes, yeah, and that was the thing with Boz and Tui Asasopo together. It was a pretty dynamic duo there at the linebacker spot. But I don't know. The guys just recovered from it. We're motivated by it, and there's nothing they can. There's nothing we can do about that. Bosworth was gone, so it was time to move on, move forward, and they did. And I don't think you really saw necessarily, other than last game. I think our defense played just as well every step of the way. So there's just a lot of good players on the defensive side of the ball, a lot of good hitters.
Well, speaking of a lot of good players on the defensive side of the ball, this is we'll keep it as part of your hot seat, but it does apply to you. Talking about players on the defensive side of the ball, Terrence Mitchell is one of our defensive player of the year candidates. I think that race for most of the season, I think it was him and Chris Oley. Although this week now, that gap is closed significantly, and there's 5 or 6 guys now in the defensive player of the year. Offensively, we've talked about this before. It looks like it's pretty much Adric Berry or Blake Moon's race to lose. Berry has the lead in stats. It's hard to deny Blake Moon's game last week. His overall stats, they pale a little bit to Adric Berry, especially in the touchdown department. But his late game heroics, especially against Iowa, at week 1 against Iowa, and then this game against Iowa, I don't know, maybe he's just got a thing for Iowa. But those two guys are kind of, the leading horses, so to speak, in the offensive player of the year. I think it would be kind of hard to unseat them. Defensively, ton of guys. I know you want to pick your guy Terrence Mitchell. Who are the guys in that race? And if you do say Terrence Mitchell, why is Terrence Mitchell deserving over the other guys?
It's hard for me
I told you it was the hot seat.
completely honest there. I mean, Terrence Mitchell, man, that dude is just a missile. He's everywhere. I mean, you see him and you think, okay, he's on the weak side. They run to the strong side. There's Terrence Mitchell making the tackle. He's everywhere. I mean, he leads CFSL in tackles with 75 tackles. He's got 4 tackles for loss. He also leads in forced fumbles. He's got 3 forced fumbles. The guy's just a missile. He hits. He plays well. He plays hard. It's hard for me not to say that's my winner. But Chris Oley, definitely in tackles, Chris is 4th. Tackles for loss, he's 2nd. He does have the 3 sacks. I mean, for me, it was really those two. Those two are the ones I kind of that I kind of nailed. I know you said that's kind of been all year, but for me, that was even going into tonight. I thought it's a two-man race on both sides, and I'm thinking Adric Berry and Blake Moon. And I think the last week could really determine a lot. I mean, if Adric Berry struggles and Boise fails to make the playoffs, but yet Blake Moon brings Auburn into the playoffs, that's got to have a say so in it. And it kind of goes the same way with Terrence Mitchell. I mean, unfortunately for us, we're not in the playoff hunt, but there's no doubt. I mean, everyone knows how well he's played and how much he deserves it. But if Chris O'Lee just has that crazy game that just solidifies Hawaii's run for the playoffs, it would help solidify that spot for him as well. So I mean, they're both deserving. Do you have anybody else on the defensive side of the ball that you were leaning toward?
Well, those are, like I said, those are the two that are kind of been up there most of the year. However, I think Antoine Curry, especially if he can have a big game against you guys, he leads
Yeah,
the league in interceptions with 5, which is 3 more than anybody else in the league.
right.
He's
I
also
did see
tied.
that. Yes.
He's also tied for second in passes defensed. The one thing that's kind of a knock on him, he's only got 43 tackles as a safety. He's not in the top 10. He actually is um, tied for 17th with Caleb
Oh,
Tuiasosopo, actually. So that kind of hurts him a little bit, but it's hard to argue with the 5 interceptions. So, depending, he could make a stand this week. I mean, I think it's kind of up in the air. I mean, the other one that you can't really overlook is Justin Philhart. He's had 2 Defensive Player of the Week awards. He's the only one on defense that's had 2. He just missed the third one. He's been playing tremendous football at the end of the year. So, with 55 tackles, which is 12th, 11 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, and a forced fumble, he's another big game. And especially if he somehow were to win a third Player of the Week, it would be really hard to remove him from that equation. And I think the other guy that we had up there was Tyler Smith was in the conversation. He's third in the league with tackles. He's got 4 tackles for loss and a sack, just like Terrence Mitchell. But he's got 2 interceptions, whereas Terrence Mitchell has none, and he's got 3 passes defensed, whereas
mm-hmm.
Terrence Mitchell has none. Now Terrence Mitchell does
Yeah.
have 3 forced fumbles, but I do think it's an interesting case. I would probably pick Terrence Mitchell right now, as I think that he's been the most impactful player for most of the season. But if Tyler Smith were to come up with a big game with 9 or 10 tackles and a pick,
Absolutely.
that could change. So I think it's an open race on defense. I do think Ole and Mitchell are the forerunners. I would give it to Mitchell right now just because he's been the bigger player more consistently. Ole's kind of disappeared a little bit the last few weeks as Hawaii struggled. But I think any of those guys are in it, and whoever has the biggest game in Week 9 may ultimately walk away with that one. So
right, I agree.
The final question I have for you on the hot seat, it's going to be the hottest question of all. You picked who you thought are going into the playoffs. Now I want you to tell me who's going to win it all. Who walks away as the season 1 champion and why?
It's real simple for me. It's Boise and it's Adric Berry.
Okay.
That offense. I mean, look. And I meant to bring this up earlier, but Adric Berry, we know what he's done passing the ball, rushing the ball. He's got 819 yards. He's got a 6.1 average with 14 touchdowns. And then you take Joe Friedrich, who we haven't even discussed, but he's got 837 yards, 6.3 average, and 7 touchdowns. Their offense is just it's as advertised, and for now they're the ones I would pick to win it all. I think that they did struggle for a couple games, but they woke up against us for sure. And there's a lot of parity. Now, with that being said, I have to give you asked for a team to predict, but honestly, whoever the 4 are that make it, they could all win.
Well, who's your second team? Who do you think they're going to face in the championship game? If it's Boise, Notre Dame, Hawaii, and Auburn, as what you had picked as your 4 teams going to the playoff, between Hawaii and Notre Dame, who would you see them facing in the championship game?
I think we'd see a Week 8 rematch, Boise and Hawaii, and I think it'd be a fun game, and it would be a good game. That's 2 of the top teams all year. They've kind of,
I think that's most people's top 2 all year, and I think if you would have done a preseason poll, those might have been the top 2, and that's also why they are the final game of the season.
Hmm.
A week 9 game and then turning around and playing 2 weeks later in the championship game would be quite quite the story.
Yes, it would.
That's that's going to create a lot of storylines the week 9, and then heading into the playoffs and all the things that could come up there. We could have a third game between I believe a third game between Notre Dame and Boise, Hawaii and Boise, or Hawaii and Notre Dame. A second game between Hawaii and Boise. Um, uh, in theory, we could get a third game between Hawaii and Auburn, which which could be amazing. It'd be kind of hard because I can't see really a scenario where Hawaii or where Auburn's not number 4 unless Hawaii winds up taking the number 1 seed, and then we could see the third game between Hawaii and Auburn, and Blake Moon did work on Hawaii, so that is that's interesting. Scott Boise winning it all, and Adric Berry, I'm guessing because of that, winning the Offensive Player of the Year. Burns is in chat claiming that David hates him. Nighthawks in chat claiming that Scott hates him.
Nothing personal. Nothing personal.
Clutch says David is fired. Scott for president. It's definitely going to be an interesting week and an interesting couple of weeks of playoffs. Just to let you guys know what the schedule is going forward. So tomorrow obviously starts week 9, and then we'll finish that week 9 on Thursday. I have a big announcement to finalize the player builds, archetypes, and the progression and all that. I'm hoping to do that tomorrow, but more than likely, I think it's probably going to be Thursday before we do that. And then what's going to happen is we'll have a week, well, 5 days from Thursday to Tuesday. The first round of the playoffs, the semifinals will be next Tuesday, so a week from tomorrow will be the semifinals. And then we will have a week off between Tuesday to Tuesday. The championship game will be the following Tuesday, and we'll have a week to do content. We'll try to get some stories written. We'll get some highlight videos of the semifinal games posted. We'll do another podcast the Monday before the championship game, which will be a blowout. It will be all about the championship game and all the stories. And hopefully what we can do for that one is to get a bunch of people on for that one. David will be back. Maybe we can get you on. Maybe we can get Burns on. Maybe we can get Worm on. Maybe we can get Pack on. Whoever's all in the playoffs. Maybe Nighthawk. Just get a bunch of people in talking about it. Maybe we'll do a panel discussion. So we'll try to blow out something for that podcast leading up to the championship game. And the championship broadcast is going to be our biggest of the year. So maybe we'll look at a pregame show and stuff for that. So giving us a week in between will allow us to do a lot of stuff and really highlight the championship game and send our season 1 off on a high note. So for all of you guys that are wondering, that's what we're looking at. So that's it. Any final comments, Scott? Anything that you want to add or throw out there?
I'm excited to see what happens. Obviously we got one more game to play, so we're going to focus on that. But once that's over, I look forward to seeing the playoffs. I think it's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch how this works out.
And then the unofficial season, the season 1.5 starts as everybody goes into recruiting.
Can't wait.
We've got at least 48 new players coming. They haven't signed up yet, but a few of them are already here. But we're going to go heavy into advertising. And we're going to fill up our new teams. We're going to fill up anybody that's disappeared over the last few weeks. And we're going to have an influx of new players coming in. And then all you guys are going to be battling for the new players. We're going to adjust a little bit on the player requirements. So that's going to create some differentiation in teams for next year. Allow the better recruiters and the teams that put in a little bit more effort to have a little bit of an extra leg to stand on. So it's definitely going to put some pressure on the ADs to go out there and really recruit hard to fill their empty spots. And I think it's going to create a lot more interesting storylines going into season 2. Next week during the playoffs, actually, we might do it tomorrow night. Tomorrow night, we'll say tomorrow night at halftime of Auburn in Florida State, we will announce a big change to season 2. I know I teased that with a big change to the player archetypes and the progression. We have another big change with 4 new teams coming. And I will announce that tomorrow at halftime of Auburn and Florida State. So you guys stay tuned for that. So about, we'll just tune in. 7:30, tune in, or 7 o'clock, tune in that game. Watch it till halftime. And then you'll see a big change for season 2. It's something that we're excited about. Me and Scott have talked about it. We talked all about it in the boardroom. I talked to all the ADs about it. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna create a lot of intrigue on how the season plays out. So you guys stay tuned for that tomorrow. Scott, we appreciate you being with us. Great show, great season. You guys battled all year, and you're one of the more compelling storylines. So congratulations on that. Definitely looking forward to seeing what you're doing in the off season, and then see what you guys do for season 2 with some of the new changes coming up. So
We're getting started already.
yeah,
Getting started already.
it's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Season 2, I think, is going to be even better than season 1. I think season 1 was great.
Mhm.
But we'll wrap that up in a couple weeks. Then we'll get on to season 2 with a lot of new things coming and a lot of excitement. So appreciate all you guys that tuning in. There are a ton of you guys tuning in. Nighthawk, Clutch, Burns, Pack, Georgia Fan, Dale Moore, Superwoman. Um, Anybody else that I missed? You guys tuning in, we appreciate you. If you guys have any questions, be sure to put them in league chat. We'll be sure to get to them. For Scott Owens, Mike Peters, we'll see you next time.